watching Numbskull News, and today I'm going to give Couz's Corner some crap. Since his Mountaineers beat my Horned Frogs, I owe him one. So, he made a video recently about the Pac-2 and the controversy going on there, and gave some of his opinions. I haven't watched all the video, but I'm going to get in there a little bit. So let's get this show on the road and give him a world of crap. And by the way, y'all should know by now I love Couz. The only reason I'm really making this video because I figured out how to use my damn earphones. I finally figured out some crap. So I'm going to make a few more videos that are kind of like this. Not all the time, but once in a while. But he started to say some things a little while ago that I disagree with. So I might as well go ahead and go face to face with the guy, kind of, sort of.
And on tap today, we are once again talking about conference realignment, this time with a focus on Washington State and Oregon State, the two lone remaining members of the Pac-12. We've heard talk that they could join forces and end up just joining the Mountain West. We've heard they could absorb the Mountain West and keep the Pac brand alive. And there's also one school of thought out there that they could join the Big 12. Now, this has kind of gained steam over the last few days, over the last week and a half maybe. And it really all started with someone that my listeners may know, and his name is Immaculate. Now, Immaculate is a personality who is a contributor over at the Big 12 Mafia show. He's been on my show before, and he recently appeared about a week or so ago, appeared on an episode of
Okay. We ain't got a name drop here, Couz. We ain't got the name drop everything all to hell.
Locked on Big 12. And Immaculate feels he's pretty confident that the Big 12 is going to expand by adding Washington State and Oregon State. And he gives his reasoning to back that up. Now, that's his opinion. He's not saying it's definitely going to happen. He's just saying it's his opinion. He thinks that's what will happen. On the other side of the argument.
But he's not just saying he thinks. You know, he does have fact-based stuff that he's basing his speculation on. That's what I like about Immaculate. So, little correction there.
Is the Monty show. Now, the Monty show feels completely different. The Monty show says there is no way, in their opinion, that Washington State and Oregon State will join the Big 12.
Yeah, and by the way, subscribe to Couz. It's good people.
Now, I'm going to talk about each side of this argument and then tell you which side I agree with. First, let's look at Immaculate's argument that it will happen. We all know that Oregon State and Washington State are the only two remaining Pac-12 teams left in the Pac-12 right now, right? We've also read reports that the NCAA has a rule that states any conference who falls below 8 members gets a 2-year grace period to build back up to a minimum of 8 members.
And that's big. However, if you want to watch this whole video, go to Couz's Corner. Check out a lot of his stuff. Subscribe, get notified, all that stuff. All the stuff you don't do on my channel, do on his channel.
In order to remain a viable conference. So that means that the PAC, or Oregon State and Washington State in this case, could get 2 years to build that conference back up. Now, whether they keep autonomous 5 status or what we like to call Power 5 status, that's a whole new conversation. But to at least remain a viable conference, they do get a 2-year grace period to try to get more teams in. We all know that the college football playoff will be expanding in the 2024 season. And that's going to dramatically increase the payouts for each conference and thus each team in those conferences, right? Navigate is a firm out there who kind of does research revolving around conference payouts, media revenue, those types of things. And that is the source where Immaculate got his information. Well, according to Navigate and thus Immaculate, he thinks that the Pac-12 will get about a $320 million payoff from college football playoff expansion. Now, and if there are only 2 teams remaining in the Pac-12, which would be Washington State and Oregon State, he says those 2 teams would get that entire lump sum of money of $320 million. Thus, he thinks they can use that as leverage to try to get into another power conference. And the Big 12, in his mind, is the one who makes the most sense. He thinks ESPN has a reason for this to happen, and he thinks the other power conferences may even want it to happen. And those are all details that I won't dive into on this show, but that's the gist of his argument. Now let's look at the Monty argument. Now, Monty, before we get into what his argument actually is, I want to say I do not appreciate how Monty handled this situation. Monty pretty much went after Immaculate and thus also went after the Locked On Big 12 show. He said Locked On Big 12 is not a reliable source of information and that Immaculate is, quote, a conspiracy theorist.
And of course, we all know the Monty show is so reliable that he double talks everything. He takes every side of everything. He's a damn politician. He's a politician with the trash guy's body. And all apologies to everybody out there who do great work picking up the trash.
Like I said, I've had Immaculate on my show. He's a very nice guy, very insightful, very thoughtful in his answers and what he thinks is going on around conference realignment. He's just a guy who likes to talk football and talk conference realignment.
He's the Jordan Peterson of realignment.
Done a lot of research around it, and he just likes to read the tea leaves and predict what he thinks is going to happen. He's not stating anything as fact, folks. So for Monty to go after him like that, I thought was very unprofessional of Monty, and I didn't like it.
Well, Monty's not supposed to be a professional. You know, he tries to, you know, have that aura about himself, but, you know, he's not. He's not. You know, when I first became aware of Monty is when he was talking shit on the Big 12, like they ain't going to get anybody. Because, you know, who wants to go there? Who wants to leave the pack to go there? Well, apparently 4 teams do. And then, of course, later on, he'd double down on, oh, the four are going, you know, all that. Then he'd come back and say, well, no, they're not going. It was ridiculous. This guy's not a professional. He's just an asshole. That's it.
With that being said, let's look at Monty's argument. Monty says that he's got sources around the Big 12 and that's the 2 institutions that claim that there have been no discussions between the Big 12 and those 2 schools. He even says that he had one source laugh at him when he even asked about the $320 million going to those 2 schools.
I'm sure.
So Monty is adamant that it is not going to happen. While Monty didn't exactly present great evidence for his argument about the $320 million because he presented based on today's current college football playoff model, not the expanded playoff model.
True.
I still agree with him on this topic.
Oh!
I do not.
How dare you, sir? That's what we got to get into right here.
Believe Washington State and Oregon State will join the Big 12, and I'm going to give you 4 reasons why. Number 1, the voting block argument. And Monty even talked about this, and I've talked about it in other shows. If you bring in 2 more Pac-12 schools, that gives you 6 new members in the Big 12 that would be former Pac-12 schools. That's a big enough voting block that they could basically vote the way they wanted to and try to steer the conference, the Big 12 conference, in the way they believed and kind of even make it a Pac 2.0, so to speak.
All right. This is a ridiculous argument. Now, the reason, and look, I understand, look, I'm not crapping on Couz here. There's a lot of people that have that same point of view on that. That's not even a worry. Number 1, Arizona had split with Arizona State. They were going to join the Big 12 come hell or high water, regardless of what Arizona State was going to do. And of course, Arizona State, once they saw the writing on the wall that Oregon and Washington were going to the Big 10, then they came. But Arizona was coming regardless. All right, they're not going to sit there and vote against the other 12 teams. All right, because Cincinnati and Houston and UCF and BYU, they're going to stick together with the original 8. That's a 12-team voting block right there. I don't think Arizona is going to go against them. And I don't think, number 1, I don't think the Big 12 Conference will make the kind of moves that would have other schools thinking that they got to come together and have some kind of crazy voting block for what? I don't know. And if you think Oregon State and Washington State are going to side with Utah and Arizona State over something, like going against those other schools, no. They would actually be pretty damn loyal to the Big 12 as far as what the 12 are this year that's going to remain. And I would include Arizona in there. I think 3 of those 6 schools, it would be hard for, if Arizona State wanted to pull some shit or Utah wanted to pull some shit, or even if Colorado wanted to pull some shit, it'd be hard to get Oregon State, Washington State, and Arizona to go along with whatever crap they're wanting to pull against the other 12 schools. If I talk about the most negative of circumstances here, which I don't see that happening, I don't think they can get a consensus on doing that with those 6 just because they used to be in a conference together. Remember, Oregon State and Washington State were left on their own. All right. They got a lawsuit right now against those other 4 schools that are right now in the pack, or sorry, right now in the Big 12. No, there's no loyalty there. They just happen to be in the same conference once upon a time.
And that might cause problems with the existing Legacy 8, or even now if you want to call it Legacy 12 members of the Big 12.
Nope.
It could cause a lot of friction within the league.
Nope.
Because they would take up such a huge portion of it, would be about a third of the voting block of the Big 12.
They won't vote together.
The second reason I don't think it would happen is you look at the Eastern schools in the Big 12, West Virginia, UCF, and Cincinnati. Now, I have no source on this.
Here we go.
I do not see them agreeing to add more Western schools, especially from the Pacific Northwest. It just adds more travel. And yes, I know they wouldn't have to play those teams every year, but you still have to play them at some point. You have to play them occasionally, and it just adds more travel and more expense to your athletic program and for your student athletes. And I don't see those schools agreeing to do that anymore unless they agree to bring in some Eastern schools to offset it.
And by the way, they are going to get Eastern schools. We all know this. And by the way, Oregon State and Washington State wouldn't even be, it'll never, ever happen unless ESPN and or Fox or both agree to bring them in with a full share for Oregon State, a full share for Washington State. That's the only way they're getting in this conference, folks. And regardless of how much money they get, regardless if they're still Power 5 members, regardless if it's $320 million, $2 million, or no million, they're not getting into the Big 12 unless the Big 12 media partners decide to pony up 2 more full shares for them. And if they decide to do that and they want them, West Virginia, UCF, Cincinnati, all the Eastern schools will vote with everybody else to add them in. That's the way it's they're not going to vote against the conference. That's not going to happen. There will be talks. I'm not saying West Virginia would be thrilled about it. I'm not saying UCF would be thrilled about it. But they're not going to vote against the Big 12 right now. If the conference feels that's the way it should go and do something. If the ESPN and Fox want this to happen and willing to pay for it, they feel they need to do it for that reason, the other schools will vote with them. There's not going to be there's not going to be some civil war in the middle of the Big 12 over Oregon State and Washington State.
The third reason is a comment Brett McMurphy made recently on 365 Sports. When asked about this topic, about Washington State and Oregon State potentially going to the Big 12, Brett McMurphy said, and I quote, "I can sum up the Big 12's interest in 2 words, no and a no," end quote. Brett went on to talk about how the Big 12 is not interested in expanding anymore. They got what they wanted in the Four Corner schools, and they would not expand anymore unless something happened with the ACC. If Clemson, Florida State, UNC, and some of these other schools blow up the ACC like it's thought could happen, then maybe the Big 12 goes and picks off a Louisville or a Pitt or another school or a few other schools to bring into the Big 12 to form sort of an Eastern wing to a degree of the conference.
Now, I totally agree with that, but Brett McMurphy, he didn't get that from a source. Let's keep that real. That's speculation on McMurphy's part. Because see, everybody in the sports space does some speculation. Now, there's others to different degrees, right? Monty show at times makes shit up. Other times they take one position and then the next show they'll change that position and do a whole different show. Or sometimes in midstream, mid-rant, whatever. Monty will just flip on a dime. It's happened over and over again. But when it comes to the big boys like 365 Sports, McMurphy, or whomever, the people that we've all kind of leaned on when it came to getting news about realignment, they all speculate to one degree or another. Brett McMurphy is not above that, and that was speculation. That's what that was. But I do agree with that speculation. I think he's right.
That is what the Big 12 is essentially sitting around waiting to happen before they expand anymore. At least that's according to Brett McMurphy and what he's hearing from his sources.
And another thing, he does say no and no. All right. Part of that is I don't believe he personally, as a person who, covers the Big 12 quite a bit. I think he's from Oklahoma State. I think that's his alma mater. I don't think he particularly wants his team or the Big 12 to have to go all the way to the Pacific Northwest. So I get some of that. And I'm sure he has sources in the Big 12 that told him there's no way that's happening. But however, I don't believe any of those conversations have happened yet. The stuff that Immaculate has looked at, this is an issue moving forward. All right. So right now that there is a problem, a hiccup, a glitch in the matrix, where everyone thought that the Big 12, sorry, the Pac-12 was going to be around and collect that money from an expanded playoff, because that was all done and set up, I believe, when USC and UCLA was still there. No one thought they were leaving. So now this thing has carved down, has been whittled down to 2 teams. No one saw that happening. And we all know that the SEC commissioner, Greg Sankey, was trying like hell to get something changed. Get it down to a 5-7 kind of deal. Well, that's not happening. It's remaining 6-6. So the things that Immaculate is saying, that there is a problem. There is a glitch in the matrix. It looks like when that money expands, because it's not just expanding to 12 teams for the same money, it's a hell of a lot more money going to come to these conferences. Right now, in the Power 5, according to what was laid out by Immaculate, and also the Monty Show read themselves, they didn't read it, but it was down there for you to read, is that each conference is basically pulling down between $80 and $100 million a year right now as far as CFP payouts, or as the top 5, Power 5. And that has been speculated, according to Navigate, to go up as much as 320, somewhere around the 320 mark. And if it's still a 6-6 deal, folks, what happens if Oregon State or Washington State make that 12-team playoff? Oh, there's a problem. So we'll see what they do about that problem, if there's a fix to that glitch or not.
And number 4, in a recent article by Dennis Dodd at CBS Sports, it talked about the college football playoff expansion and how the Pac blowing up essentially would impact that. And Dennis interviewed SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey as part of that article. And here's what Greg Sankey had to say when asked about the CFP and the Pac-12 potentially playing for 2 years with only 2 schools. Here was his answer. The CFP, just to be clear, is not the NCAA, end quote. Now, I think Greg Sankey is right here. The college football playoff can make decisions separate from the NCAA. I mentioned earlier about the NCAA bylaws allowing conferences to play with less than 8 members for 2 years. That doesn't mean the college football playoff has to abide by that same rule. They could totally leave those schools out of the college football playoff discussion. If they go to even if they stay at a 6-6 model, 6 automatic bids, 6 at-larges, they do not have to count them as a conference. If they don't want to, they can make their own rules. They're totally.
Well, they can. They can. But now you're trying to convince, the group of 5 schools to join your side with that. That's a little difficult. Because I don't think the group of 5 like Greg Sankey much at all. I don't think they trust the Big 10 at all. So if that's what they're wanting to do, they may just give you the big old finger and say, hey, cut them a check. That's your problem. Now, Of course, none of this is decided yet. All we do know is nothing changes for 2024. And right now, the Pac-2 is still a Power 5 conference with 2 teams, and they will be for the next 2 years. So now the CFP's got to find a way to cut out a Power 5 conference, not a group of 5, a Power 5 conference, albeit with 2 teams, special circumstances, all that stuff. But last time I checked, and last time Immaculate checked, Kurt Schultz is on that board. So you're going to take his board seat? You're going to take his vote away? Uh, that seems a little chaotic that you could just come in and take someone's vote away. When you're still a recognized conference by the NCAA, and I know they're different.
That's my understanding of how the college football playoff works. So they could choose not to let them have the payout money, and they could choose not to give them access if they wanted.
Like I said, not if Kurt Schultz still has a vote. You can't. And that's a tricky thing to get the vote away from him. You're probably going to need all the other 9 conferences to vote that way. And I think a lot of people see Greg Sankey as a big prick. I don't know. I don't know if everyone's good. All it would take is the American to say, nah, I'm not good with that. And there goes that vote. There goes that. All it takes is one.
Now, Washington State University President Kirk Schultz is actually on the College Football Playoff Board of Managers.
There you go.
Govern the College Football Playoff.
There you go.
And with the Pac-12 basically collapsing, many on the College Football Playoff Board want to change the structure of the College Football Playoff. They also need to renegotiate the CFP format from 2026 and beyond. That's when they basically have to, what Brett Yormark said, could start from scratch and go to a whole different model if they choose. Many people feel, and I think Immaculate is one of those, that Schultz could use this position or his vote as part of this College Football Playoff governing board or board of governors, board of managers. He could use leverage. He could basically say, hey, I'm not giving you guys anything unless you give Washington State a spot in a Power 5 conference. Now, is that possible? Yeah, I guess it's possible, but I think it's highly unlikely. Number one, Kirk Schultz is one voice out of 11. I don't think that committee is going to let anybody dictate what they talk about and run basically roughshod over the meetings. I don't see that happening. And even if he did, the Big 12 would have to agree to let those schools in. And folks, I go with Brett McMurphy here. Now, I like Immaculate. I think he's a great guy, and I hope to have him back on my show. But I just disagree with him on this. I do not think Washington State and Oregon State are going to the Big 12. When you go back and listen to what Brett McMurphy predicted when it came to the Big 10, to Oregon and Washington going to the Big 10, the Four Corner School was going to the Big 12, he was right on almost all of those issues from the very beginning. And Brett McMurphy's not the type of reporter that comes out and says something unless he believes it to be true. And he said that the Big 12 was not interested in adding Oregon State and Washington State. Now, I know conferences can say things and then change their mind, or maybe they just don't want to let it out because it can influence the negotiations. I understand all of that.
And keep in mind, a lot of these big dog reporters, they don't like it when some little pissant like Immaculate comes along and beats them to a story, or even comes across something like, hey, this is actually, it might be a thing. Because the Big 12 aren't going to tell Brett McMurphy. They're not going to tell 365 Sports, regardless of how great the sourcing is. They're not going to even talk about it. All right, they're not going to talk about it right now to anybody, much less Monty. But they're not going to say anything. Neither is Oregon State or Washington State. You can have all the sources in the freaking world on this shit. No one's going to say anything unless it's 100% going to happen. Then you might get a leak. But remember, how many leaks were there with USC and UCLA? How many leaks was there of Texas and OU? Not a lot. And those are way bigger moves. Monstrous moves. And into the last hour, there was a ton of big-time reporters saying, no. USC, UCLA, that ain't happening. Texas OU, no one was even talking about it. No one was even talking about it, y'all. So let's don't act like this stuff can't happen in the dark. It damn sure can.
But Brett McMurphy has a lot of sources inside these conferences, schools,
Yeah,
whatever.
he does.
If anybody would know, he would, in my
No,
opinion. And I
not
trust Brett
necessarily.
McMurphy's reporting on this because, like I said,
I trust Brett McMurphy too, but nobody bats 1,000. Let's just go back in Brett McMurphy's history. He's gotten things wrong before. Okay, nobody bats 1,000. I don't care how good of a reporter or how well sourced you are, how you know how high of a level of integrity you have. Everybody gets something wrong sometimes. All right, we can't just. Brett McMurphy's not the Bible. Okay, it's not truth from cover to cover.
he's been right on almost every conference realignment issue, at least that I
Almost.
followed from the beginning.
Anyway, I love Couz. I love Couz, and I love that he gave an honest take from from where he's at in and around the West Virginia area. I love that he gave that his response to that. And where do I sit with it? Do I think it's imminent? I don't think it's imminent. If you're talking within weeks, maybe before Christmas, I don't know. There's a whole court thing going on in November. There's going to be more litigation after that. There's several things going to go on before any of that happens. But remember, this ACC shit is kicking off. There's a lot more speculation about the ACC and teams getting out of there as early as 2023. We're talking this month, next month, maybe sometime after the football season, but definitely in 2024, shit's going to go down. We all know this. And the Oregon State Washington State thing is not going to go away anytime soon. They are fighting tooth and nail. And keep in mind, Immaculate, he said, on all this stuff, once Washington State and Oregon State won that injunction to basically get control of all the assets of the pack, that changed a lot of things for him. And it should have. And I think Drake Toll is a little bit right. Maybe he's way out in front of this story. And right now, everyone's like, oh, it's not a story. It's not a story. Well, it's not a story till it is. That's usually how it goes. Maybe this turns into nothing. But there's definitely something to this, because a guy like Immaculate wouldn't even bring it up if there wasn't. So nothing's for sure. But as Lloyd Christmas once said, there is a chance. Anyway, that's all I got on this crap for today. Talk to y'all tomorrow. Bye.